Hello, everyone. My name is Bernadette Smith, and I am CEO of Equality Institute. And I wanted to welcome you to this month's DEI Double Feature, The Future of Pride. Today, I am joined by Derrick Johnson. Derrick, would you mind introducing yourself?
Of course. Welcome, everyone. Derrick Johnson here. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Organization for Social Impact. Impact is with an E.
Well, welcome. We are excited to have you again. We did this together last year, and so it's exciting to have this conversation again because stuff has been changing. I mean, things are changing, continue to change quickly. And I think that the conversation today is going to help folks, whether you are involved actually in a company as an employee resource group leader or member, or part of the DEI council, or a DEI employee, or whether you are interested in learning more about what's happening outside of companies, like sort of what's happening in terms of meetings, events, etc. Derrick's your guy for that.
Yeah, it's been a great journey. I mean, I've chaired now the LGBT Meeting Professionals Association now in my second year, and it's been a great learning experience, and I've gathered so many resources and so many connections out in the space. I'm really happy to be here with you, though, today.
Awesome. And I know it's been a busy day for you, so thanks for making time for this. And thank you for the comments coming in already. It's great to see folks engaging. And, you know, we would love to keep the conversation going throughout the session because there's a lot of value in what you all who are attending have to add and your own experiences. So we're going to have some conversation starters throughout the session today. But I just, I want to make sure that you feel like you have a voice here, and we all learn when we all share. So even though Derrick and I are leading the session, would love to see what other comments are happening in the chat. All right, so let's get this going, Derrick.
Yeah.
So, in the past 2 years, a lot has changed, right? So in terms of inclusion, in terms of engagement, in terms of fun, how do you think we did? And people who are viewing, share in the chat. How do you think we did overall in terms of inclusion, engagement, and fun? 2 years of virtual Pride.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, we've had the opportunity to really evolve as people, I think, over the past couple years, with so many life-changing things happening right in front of our eyes. Technology's really allowed us to see through the looking glass, see into people's homes and see into people's hearts, and it's really provided us the chance to drive social and lasting change within communities. So I think we've done a great job. I think we've done a great job at adopting ourselves to this drastic evolution that's really transformed industries over the past couple of years, and we've done a good job at reconnecting with folks, with being with individuals who are so far away from us yet mean so much to our lives. Personally, I've connected with some of my long time friends that live geographically out of the Washington, D.C. area, and we've been speaking and connecting almost as if they were still here. So I would say, as a whole, our community has done an extraordinary job at reaching, at connecting, and really making a difference.
Yeah, I would agree too. It was forced upon us, obviously, and I think that our ability to adapt was a testament to the resilience of our community, the creativity of our community, and how much we really need each other.
Yeah.
I think that it sometimes can be easy to forget that it can be lonely out there, right? And when you're faced with a pandemic, sometimes you have a lot of time by yourself. And
Exactly.
so, it can sort of challenge us to do better and challenge us to look for those connections and more meaningful relationships. I had some similar experiences in which I reconnected with folks who I hadn't talked to in years, and people who live elsewhere. I live in the Chicago suburbs. It's not like I'm going out in Boys Town during the pandemic. I wasn't even before the pandemic, let's be honest.
Will you after the pandemic, or now that things have opened back up?
Well,
Probably
I
not.
have a partner and a kid. I'm not like hanging out there so much anyway, but I've certainly gone out in Andersonville a few times in the past 10 months or so, but I could probably count how many times on one hand. But anyway, it does, you're right. It sort of brought us together in ways that I think were probably very surprising. And I think that was one of the beauties of the pandemic. And, one of the other things that I think was really exciting was to see people who aren't always the obvious community members. They might be the more, the people in our community who might be families, or people who might have disabilities, people who don't always, we don't always engage in our events. And I think we did a really good job of creating space for more folks. So on that note, let's move on to some of the lessons we learned. So these lessons are really what we're going to frame our conversation today around. Lessons around access, intersectionality, activism, and community. Not just the pandemic, but the past couple of years more generally. And again, please continue to share in the chat. Welcome, and certainly introduce yourselves, share your own perspectives, your own stories, experiences. We absolutely love that. All right, so let's get started with some of the lessons we learned around access, Derrick.
Yeah. So, Bernadette, does this video play on your computer?
No, it doesn't
All right.
play.
That's perfectly fine. So this is an illustration of Google's 360 camera. It's an example of leveraging technology to really see into the lives, the world of so many. In more than 70 countries, it's a crime to be gay. Even in countries where it's or a part of the LGBT plus community, even in countries where it's legal, many LGBT plus people face discrimination and violence just for being themselves. This year, Google is going to destinations around the world and leveraging their 360 camera to bring prides, bring celebrations to individuals, to people who are a part of the LGBT plus umbrella, to their homes. And they're documenting global pride using this technology. And they're working with the LGBT plus communities to invite those who can't be in the march to be in person, to celebrate prides in new ways, using, again, this virtual Google 360 camera. And so I thought that in itself was a huge step. One of the largest companies in our world, helping to cultivate this togetherness for equality. And whether it's taking a stance against discrimination in a sport or Olympic game, or being the first company to provide full coverage of transgender employees' healthcare, Google has stepped up to the plate, I think, and really became a strong ally to the LGBT plus community. And as they say on their website, we march together for equality. And I think that is something that is really has been one of the biggest things that is transformed now prides into something that's beyond just the communities in which they're held. It's now accessible to so many more. And Google is taking that step further in ensuring that different prides, different communities are being showcased for all.
Wow, I didn't realize that. And is this something that they are doing for the first time this year, or did they do it in the past 2 years as well?
Yeah, this is a lesson learned from Google, and this will be the first year that they're actually executing it
Wow.
on a global scale.
That is really amazing. Yes, because as someone shared in the chat, as someone who Monica shared, as someone who gets anxious in big crowds, virtual events have allowed me to participate so much more than I did pre-pandemic. So you're right, people in countries where people can't be openly gay, people who don't like big crowds, families who have a hard time, wrangling their kids to go to parades, introverts, people with disabilities. I mean, this type of programming or this type of opportunity gives all of those folks access. And I think that's really spectacular. I mean, last year we saw this sort of forced upon us, San Diego Pride and a lot of other prides went virtual again or hybrid. And so with this being forced upon us in years past, it's amazing to see Google actually doing it with intention as a commitment going forward, as it not just being something that is, that was just a pandemic thing, but actually is sustainable. I absolutely love that.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, when you really think about the individuals that exist out there that don't have direct access to a community of support, and what this could potentially do to impact their lives in a broader scale, it's absolutely amazing. And I think it will help evolve our community even more through visualized representation. We see it every day, but the more that we see kind of individuals from the LGBT plus umbrella actively in the space of in the public eye and on television and on live streams, we really understand each other a little bit more. And that empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, I completely agree. And and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the community section as well. Yeah. Another thing that was really fantastic, which is continuing, is virtual educational events. So Lesbians Who Tech has had 2 years of virtual Pride programming, educational content, really great, high quality speakers, tons of diversity within their speakers. And this year they're continuing that. They're doing their Pride Summit again virtually, but they're having smaller in-person celebrations in cities. So get-togethers in various cities, including here in Chicago. And while I'm a lesbian, I'm not in tech, so I don't know whether I should go.
You can learn something new, right?
Right? But the educational events were great. And I think that's one of the things that I saw happen a lot with the companies, our clients, Equality Institute's clients, was a lot of virtual education events. Chapters, ERG chapters were sharing budgets. They were having global events in previous years, those events were more local based. And so I think it's really interesting to see that continuing. We're booking for this year, very busy, and everything is virtual. We're not, even for the Chicago-based companies that we're working with, even for the Chicago-based ERG chapters that we're working with of individual companies, it's all staying virtual for educational programming. And I think that means that there's just more and more people who can get to attend, because in the past, folks who may be at the retail level or frontline employees or employees who were perhaps on the shop floor, like manufacturing type employees or field employees who are on the road, weren't able to always attend these in-person trainings, but they're much more likely to be able to attend the virtual trainings and workshops. So I think that kind of access it, to those other types of employees beyond just the people who work in a cubicle, I think has been really fantastic as well.
And it definitely moves beyond just the live streaming event itself. It's the archive of that. And for individuals who aren't able to fully participate during that time and that specific location, it gives them the opportunity to still learn and enhance their own growth and development at their time because, again, of the access. That entryway, we now have a doorway into not just the communities, but to your point now, to the foundational information and the thought leaders and knowledge is power. And it really, I think, is important, an important element of our community too.
Absolutely. And I would love for folks to type in the chat if you have any. We know for those of you who did enjoy pandemic era Pride, I would love to hear what it was that you enjoyed about it. What did you enjoy most? Please feel free to share in the chat. I know someone shared earlier that it's about, being able to participate when you don't like big crowds. So yeah, anyone else who wants to share what you actually sort of the upsides that you have seen or that you've enjoyed, please go ahead and do so. And we're going to move on to the next section, which is intersectionality. This is another huge lesson that I think we all learned. And for those people who don't know what this term means, or didn't know what this term meant 2 years ago, you certainly probably know what it means now, but I'm going to define it for you anyway. Intersectionality is a term really popularized by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, and it really represents the layers of identity that folks have. And the more layers of marginalized identities that folks have, the more challenging of a lived experience they typically have. So, for example, a woman has a challenging time, but a woman of color has an even more challenging time. And so it's the layers of marginalized identity, how those can compound to create a completely unique and different, more challenging, generally lived experience. So intersectionality really is about being very forward facing and intentional about including diversity. And we saw that happen last year with Interpride theme. Interpride's the global pride organization. And their theme was "You Are Included." And I think that really shows that it's not just people in the community who look like me, right? It's people in the community who look like anyone. I mean, there's an incredible amount of diversity within the community. We talk a little bit about what LGBT MPA did, Derrick?
Yeah. So last year we had our first ever event, which was the Day of Diversity. And that really spoke to that intersectionality where it represented every person and every aspect of humanity. We wanted to honor the past with a really future-focused eye up towards the future in embracing self-affirmation and dignity and equality and increased visibility and diversity, the diversity that existed amongst all people. And so underneath of this event, there were themes like not just DEI, not just a racial thing, stories from the crowd where we touched on individual stories that were from not just the LGBT plus community, but allies and their relationship with our world. The evolution of the space and just individuals showing their pride. And I think that the culmination of the day really gave individuals from the not just the LGBT plus community, but the meetings and events community a real focus on that North Star of embracing diversity in all aspects of what we do so that people can feel like they can bring their full authentic selves into every space. And that was the idea behind creating this exceptional day. And I think we achieved that. We had over 20 exhibitors who signed up, exhibitors and sponsors who signed up for the event. We had over 300 attendees. And again, this was this was the first ever event for the organization. It's very, very powerful. And again, it represented all people. We didn't just have speakers from the LGBT plus community. We didn't have speakers representing a certain demographic. We wanted to go through as many communities and many individual distinctions as humanly possible, to ensure that we had a broad range of representation, whether it had been from gender, age, social and economic status, location, geographic location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So very successful day, which is now one of the staples for LGBT MPA, which I'm very excited about.
Congratulations, Derrick. I was one of the speakers, and I know that it was a really great event. The audience was very engaged in the content, and you did a great job putting it together. And I think what the lesson here is really about making diversity and intersectionality part of the forefront of the discussion. It shouldn't be an afterthought. Having a diverse slate of speakers and really having a broad definition of what diversity is, as you explained, I think is really the great takeaway here, and certainly a huge lesson learned. I mean, we saw that a slide from a panel that Barilla put together during Pride Month, but it's leading with diversity. These folks are chosen because they have unique perspectives. It's not just the same story. We all have our individual stories, and when we lead with diversity, and intersectionality is part of the discussion, just built in as part of the discussion, then I think it's making sure that all of the voices are actually being shared and heard, and we want to make sure that those voices get access and get a platform, that those voices are amplified, because there can be a lot of other voices that have more power, that can be louder. And so we have to be much more intentional about leading with this way and being proactive about curating content that really speaks to the diversity. As a company and as a speaker myself, one of the things that I was asked to do in the past few years, which is great, is that my clients were saying, hey, we want to make sure that your content is intersectional, is diverse, and isn't just, you the white girl. And I appreciate being checked on that, right? Because it shows that they're being proactive about this, not reactive. And I think it's just a really incredible shift. And finally.
Yeah, I think I love that intentionality part that you mentioned. And I think as we continue to move forward, we have to look beyond what we can see. While we could have a panel, for example, or speakers who look the same, they come from different places. We are all individuals and unique and bring different perspectives into this world. For example, there could be a panel of all Black men, and I can represent the gay one, but also represent the one that comes from a first generation college graduate, or that lives in on the East Coast of the United States, or that has traveled the world, or there's so many different distinctions that each of us bring in from our shared experiences or not shared experiences that really create that diversity and that difference in opinion and thought. But collectively, we can make something greater than what the individuals could do themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would love for folks to start sharing in the chat what was most successful for your organization. If you work for a company that has celebrated virtual Pride, what worked really well? And we have a question here from Vincent, which I think you actually answered really well, Derrick, is how does a global company define diversity across jurisdictions and subcultures? And, as you were talking about the or, or college grad, first grade generation, et cetera. I mean, all of those things are dimensions of diversity, certainly beyond sexuality, beyond race, beyond religion. I mean, when I'm doing a presentation, I say diversity means everyone. because if we don't define it that way, then there are going to be people in power who feel excluded, and we do not want them to feel excluded because they are, first of all, they're in power, and we don't want to tick them off. But beyond that, their voice actually matters. Their voice is really meaningful, and they have their own unique stories and lived experiences as well. So all of that counts as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. It could get as small as liking peanut M&Ms or just the chocolate ones without nuts. So that's diverse.
Exactly. So we're seeing some other comments here. Video montages, submitted clips from members of our business resource network. That's awesome. Individual and group posts on the internal workplace page have been very popular. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, I think that this is, intersectionality. I'm just so glad that we've reached this point where this becomes, again, something that we're leading with, and that intersectionality and diversity within our own community is not just an afterthought. All right. So let's move on to the next section, which is about activism. So there have been a lot of recent stories coming up about activism, corporate activism, and beyond. So can you tell us what happened? A little bit about what happened in Florida and what the response that you've seen has been.
Yeah, so we're specifically talking about this "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida, and at Connect Marketplace coming up in a month or so. These destinations: Visit Orlando, Visit Fort Lauderdale, Experience Kissimmee, and Visit Jacksonville. These Florida destinations are taking a stand against that bill, and they are sponsoring the LGBT Meeting Professionals Association at that event with the slogan of "Say Gay." And Visit Knoxville, who's not a part of Florida, is is chiming in. And when you think of destinations, places that we go, they are all separate from the government agencies that exist in those states, in those cities, and operate differently. And this, I think, is the first time I'm seeing, kind of in my professional career, destinations, convention and visitors bureaus, cities take a stand against inequality and injustice in this way, in this capacity. And I think during the lockdown and during the past couple years, we've seen multiple cases of individuals stepping forward and saying, no, we are not going to stand for injustice or inequality. And now companies are coming into that fold also because of the pressures of consumers, because of the pressures of their employees, but also because it's the right thing to do. And I'm very proud to be a part of the meetings and events industry, because it really helps to drive the social and economic transformation within communities. And this is only a single example of that, with these destinations coming forward to push against state legislation that could very well, at the end of the day, maybe hurt them a little bit through additional regulations. I look what's happening to Disney World as they push back against this bill. Now they're losing certain abilities. This could very well happen to these destinations, but they're doing it anyway. And I think that very notion of activism, of taking a stand against wrong, has evolved so much within our world within the past 2 years. And I'm very excited to see where this goes and how we can manifest change quicker through these voices that are coming forth and organizations that are supporting them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was really impressed when you shared that story with me when we talked last week. I mean, I had no idea. I mean, and for some folks who might be watching, you might not be aware of this, but in Tennessee and in Florida, there are no statewide protections if you are LGBTQ from discrimination on the basis of public accommodations. So in many parts of Florida and Tennessee, someone who's gay or trans or bi or whatever could go into a restaurant and be legally denied service because it's not against the law. And so to have these cities, these destinations speak up and say, hey, not only is this Don't Say Gay bill not cool, but we really welcome you here. Like, we want you to come anyway. We have your back. And I think it's just, it's something that I want to see more of, especially in so many states where there is a lot of anti-LGBTQ legislation. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from these destinations in particular. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it continues to play out.
Yeah. What happens next will be very interesting, because again, you have the people. We all have voices, and we all have an equal say in what happens in this world that we live in, and it's up to us to step forward and evolve and help it evolve.
I agree. We have a great question here in the comments. Do you have any recommendations for tools or resources companies can provide employees on how to support the community, given all the anti-LGBTQ bills pending across state legislatures? That is a great question. I think, my advice, Madison, is really to make sure that your company has tight policies that show your employees that you have their back. So really, like, if you make sure that you can get yourself 100 on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index, because that is the minimum you should be doing. And then I think the other thing that would be really significant is to make sure that your company has kind of a prepared statement, like some sort of stance that you have officially taken on these bills, so that when these bills continue to pop up, especially if your company has locations in those states, so you can have something ready to go. Because what I keep seeing is that companies are a little bit slow to this. So we are seeing more activism, but we're seeing that this happens a little bit too late. So here's for example, what happened with Disney is that in Florida, Disney actually, specifically as a company, made donations to some of the politicians behind that Don't Say Gay bill. So even though Disney has prided themselves on being really LGBTQ inclusive in terms of their employee policies, they definitely did not walk the talk. And so there were walkouts by many Disney employees over the past month. And so Disney had this misalignment. So what I would really encourage your organization to look at is, where are your donations actually going? Even the donations of the leaders of your company, where are they going? And beyond that, to have some sort of prepared statement so you can be ready to release that statement as these bills come up, because your company has more power than you might realize. And I think it's one thing to, be part of a list of 100 companies that takes out a full page newspaper ad that says, hey, we don't support this stuff. But it's a whole other thing to be the first company that does it. So right. Get your prepared statement ready, and don't be reactive. Be right there. So your employees know that you're actually walking the talk. Yes, we see I think someone else here said in the chat, we developed a social equity policy adopted by our board. So I'd imagine that has something to do with the political, in quotes, because I don't really think this has to do with politics, but the political moves that might matter to your employees. So Haley, I would imagine that's probably what you're talking about. But this stuff really matters. And we are starting to see more and more companies be proactive about this, but I want to see that happen even more. That's my hope. There's definitely been a lesson learned, but I hope that we can build upon that. We definitely saw much more engagement in LGBTQ and Black topics, again, intersectionality, a couple of years ago after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. And there were definitely a lot of companies who spoke out then, both on Black and LGBTQ topics, because that happened right before Pride Month. So I think kind of building on that is really where we need to be going. So
Yeah.
did your company show any activism in the past 2 years? Sorry, Derrick.
Oh no, I was just going to say that that train definitely must continue down the path, and we can't stay at the level of just being active. We have to continue to push for that dramatic and drastic change over time. The systemic change that currently exists in policies and regulations, and it takes a community to be able to do that. And again, going back to that access over the past 2 years has provided more insight, more knowledge, more exposure to these things that are happening in communities across the world. It's bringing different people in that could potentially help solve these problems, companies in that could potentially help strengthen the marginalized. And I think that it's all interconnected and leads us to this path of hopefully of equity across all channels and inclusion and keeping diversity kind of as that North Star.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, honestly, for companies, if there is a misalignment between your HR policies of LGBTQ inclusion and what actually happens with your dollars or what you say or don't say when these types of bills come up, if there is that misalignment, your employees are going to let you know about it. And so will your customers. So again, be proactive about this, and and we just need to keep building on it. Any
Yeah.
other thoughts or comments in the chat about any activism your company has shown in the past couple of years? I would love to see more ideas, because if you can't tell, I get very excited about this stuff.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I've heard, Bernadette, that we've struggled, or not struggled with, but we had to have a discussion about as a board for LGBT MPA, was how we were going to address this as an organization. And it was, do we protest this destination, or do we actively seek to be in this space? And the result of that conversation was unanimous that we have a responsibility to educate and to be on the front lines for our community. And pulling away is not in the best interests of anyone. It doesn't teach anyone lessons. It doesn't evolve the other side. It just takes away potential revenue streams. And obviously money is very important in this world, but we want something bigger than that financial impact. We want a lasting impact that's going to be sustainable through time, and really help to create spaces for all people to feel that they could bring their authentic selves into.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that that's the decision that you make, because I think, as Thor said here in the chat, I believe we have a responsibility to create allies, not enemies. And I couldn't agree more. I think that there's an awful lot of polarization, and honestly, it breaks my heart. I like to build a bridge. That's that's just me. All right. So here is a great question, actually, Derrick. How do we break down diversity silos when employees are passionate about a single dimension of diversity?
Yeah, and that's through empathy. And we all come to the table in different spaces, different parts of the journey towards the end. And it's important to recognize that and to embrace the differences that exist, the thoughts that exist across all channels. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I can be empathetic and hear you and take what you're saying and truly think about it as and why you think that this way. This people-centric mentality
for
individuals, for and are we on that slide yet?
That's a perfect segue for the community slide.
I feel like I'm going down this road here, and yeah. So this people-centric mentality is something that we as individuals, as communities, as organizations haven't really truly allowed us to govern and lead with. We've led mostly with the success of a strategic direction for financial or group success. But when you really break that down, financials are based for individuals. Groups are made of individuals. This idea that each individual is unique and different should, in fact, then drive the strategy. And now looking through change, looking through evolution for the future should be done with this empathy, this impact. Impact is, again, with this E here for kind of the organization that I founded back in December, because it's changing the world through this empathetic lens. And when we can really embrace our fellow people in this world and approach situations with an empathetic mind, that's when we can open doors to options that aren't just bias. And no one of us is always ever 100% correct. I know my partner tells me that all the time. But I think it's important for us to really approach situations with this empathy, with this openness to difference. And collaboratively, we can come to a space of acceptance. And at the very end, that's all we all want in this world, is to be loved and accepted. And then so that we can take that and learn, share, and contribute to the greater good.
I agree. And there's a question here which is related to empathy in the sense that it's on a global level here. What's the best way to keep on top of new/different activism/implementing changes on a global level, which is respectful of different jurisdictions, laws, and cultures? And the first thing that comes to mind is to subscribe to the Alturi email. That's ALTURI. And they have a weekly newsletter, which is about what's happening globally in the LGBTQ plus community. So that's, again, ALTURI.org, I believe. And another one is Outright International. So Outright International is another organization that's focused on global LGBTQ inclusion, and you get on their newsletter and you can sort of learn what's going on around the world. I'm just going to give a quick shout out for my newsletter, which goes out every Saturday, and that's all about what's happening, what's going right, good news that you can be inspired by related to diversity, equity, and inclusion and corporate social responsibility. Some of the stories are LGBTQ and many are not. So between those three resources, I think you'll have a lot to digest and work on. We see some great ideas here that Haley shared in the chat about different diversity months and celebrations that have been implemented by Haley's organization. And Derrick, Bannon loves that impact concept. I do too.
Yeah, it's a strong one. When you really think, well, first of all, when you think about the word, you say impact. When you read it, it still says impact. But even the visualization here is seeing something different, but seeing through the eyes of something different. But at the very end of the day, it still says impact.
Right.
Taking that same principle and applying it to our lives it's parallel. It's a parallel. So
absolutely
appreciate that.
Yes, I love it. All right. So, other things that we've seen happen that I think are really positive related to the community more broadly is just virtual community programming. I mean, this is a screenshot from an LGBTQ plus youth center in Maine, and just the online activities for youth. Again, many folks who might not be out, might not be able to leave their home, people who maybe were home from college during the pandemic, but didn't have an opportunity to connect with people locally in their community. Having these types of online community-based activities, I think is something I hope that we see continuing beyond just the past couple of years. All right. Another thing related to the community, and this sort of builds on what some folks were talking about before happening within their own companies, is the global, how the different LGBTQ ERGs, employee resource groups, have been coming together. And here's a screenshot from something that I can't remember the name of it, Intuit. This is a screenshot of the different employee resource group leaders from around the world coming together to share their stories as part of a program. So again, sort of global community collaboration with people that we might not otherwise know from even within our own company. And because we had this virtual opportunity, we were able to bring people together in a way that we weren't really doing consciously before. And I think that that's fantastic. I love it. And I hope that we keep doing it.
Yeah, this idea of community, it really expands when you think about the ability that we have through this access component, and driving these interactions with individuals of like minds, of like hearts, that have existed, but we haven't necessarily been able to connect with. It's a pretty powerful thing, and I think it's going to evolve even more so as we traverse into this world of virtual, and this metaverse and virtual reality and all of that stuff that's coming. I think is going to really help transform the way that we connect as individuals, and are represented in these spaces. I'm pretty excited about that.
Me too. Me too. And I think another thing that we saw that's been really lovely in terms of community building is that we were literally invited into each other's homes. You know, we saw where our coworkers, where our colleagues, where our peers lived. Before we all figured out virtual backgrounds, you know, we saw someone's bookshelf or, you know, their potted plant or whatever. You know, there were lots of conversation starters.
The kid walking in the background.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, conversation starters about the dog or the pet, whatever, all of these things. We were literally invited into each other's homes. And I think it was really, it built empathy as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about at the time of the lockdown per se, and
Sure.
sitting in the kitchen and being able to see, I had to position my computer so, because I felt embarrassed having my bed and in the frame of the video, because it was a work call, and then just got over the fact of that, thinking, okay, well, this is where you live. It's okay. And you made your bed. and you spent a lot of money on that comforter. So you should be okay with showing it. But no, I think it also allowed the individuals on this side of the camera to feel more comfortable with who they were authentically. And as even beyond seeing from the other side, seeing into my world, it also, for me on this side, made me reflect on the way that I portray myself externally and be more comfortable with who I was, the things that I say, and the way that I act, and who I shared experiences with, etc. I think it truly evolved me as a person, and I wonder if it did the same for others out there too, because I was very much a closed person. What happened in my professional life was over here. What happened in my personal life was over here, and the way that I acted or interpreted things may have differed based off of the environment that I was in, but that really melded together and became one person, which is me. And I think I think this time away from people and bringing people into my world virtually has really helped evolve Derrick as an individual.
Well, we love you in all of your glory and your evolved self, Derrick.
Thank you.
You know, we've all been on our journeys, right? And certainly the past couple of years have accelerated that for many of us. And I'm really psyched though that, I mean, these lessons have really, I think they've evolved all of us. And the challenge here is making it stick. And I would love for folks to share in the chat if you or your company has become more connected to the LGBTQ plus community in the past 2 years. So have you become more connected? And if so, how? Because I think people are craving community. Even though we are all open now, we are still craving community in any of the ways we can get it. And there's more access now than ever to our points from earlier. See here some folks, great virtual friends in coffee chats and chamber meetings. All of this stuff really matters. It really does matter. We've learned some fantastic lessons that, again, we can just keep building upon. And it's all about creating a more inclusive culture for all of us within the LGBTQ community and beyond, and all of the dimensions of all of our identities. All of these things, as far as I'm concerned, are wins. And we're in a better place. I believe we really are in a better place.
Yeah, 100%. And it's up to us to keep it going. We can't just rest on where we are today. We have to evolve it into something better for tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I appreciate those folks who've been sharing your ideas in the chat and the great conversation. Paula, thank you so much for complimenting my newsletter. I hope that you have some ideas that you've taken from today's discussion that you can bring back to your own organization, that you can rethink how you want to approach Pride this year and beyond, because what you do now really does send a message for how you want your organization to move forward. This is a time to really build upon what we have learned from the past couple of years. In terms of what my company is doing, I kind of mentioned earlier that we do a bunch of workshops. We have 3 main Pride sessions that I'll just talk quickly about. One is our version of LGBTQ 101, and that's Over the Rainbow. We have our version of Trans 101, which is called Blurred Lines. So both of those are 1-hour educational workshops with a super engaging chat, and Blurred Lines is facilitated by a transgender or a non-binary presenter. I am one of the facilitators of Over the Rainbow, but we have a couple of others as well. Those sessions are high energy. They're really good. They're really, really great content. We have great feedback on those sessions. And then the last session, that's our sort of workshop type session, is called Born This Way. And it's actually delivered as a keynote by me. And it's really targeted towards LGBTQ plus resource groups, Pride groups. And it's really about leveraging your identity for workplace success. So how your queer identity is actually an asset and how you can use that to be a better leader. So it's a really inspiring, uplifting session, especially for LGBT groups who are, maybe you're stuck in a rut. Maybe you need to re-engage folks. Maybe you're looking for new energy. That's the session to do it. And we're also offering Pride Month trivia as well, and a lunch and learn team trivia kind of thing. So that's another great option. Thank you for the recommendation of Over the Rainbow. And these are my team of facilitators who work on these sessions with me. Derrick, do you want to give a little plug for your own organization?
Yeah, Organization for Social Impact, impactus.org. We are, I am everything. I'm the marketer. I am the chief finance officer. I am the consultant, but the premise behind the organization is very simple, to help drive change within organizations, reshaping organizations for impact through empathy. So very, very much diving into a people-centric approach and educating around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility that comes after The DEI, the US government adopted that back in August of 2021. And I think that is so vital to recognize and can continue to drive the evolution there. But through training and through developing measurements along the way and mile markers to articulate kind of the direction of the organization for Social Impact really helps drive change internally for all groups, whether that's an association, a nonprofit, work with government agencies and destinations globally in achieving kind of their goals as it relates to DEIA. So very excited about the mission and the premise for what the work that I'm doing in the space. Very much inspired by the work that Bernadette is doing with her organization, and I'm very excited that all of you have participated in this conversation with us because it's all important, and the prides of today and of tomorrow will ultimately impact communities and individuals beyond our lifetime. So it's going to be a fun ride, but also to the point earlier, we need to learn from the past and not just walk in the present or the future without those lessons.
That's beautifully said. Absolutely beautifully said, Derrick. And I really appreciate your parting words there, because I really don't have anything to add. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have anything you'd like to add in the chat, please go ahead, share any final ideas, things that your company or organization has done. Everyone is learning here today, and really appreciate you joining us. This link is going to be up so you can watch it on LinkedIn, replay it, share it, any of that you would like. We'll also send it out by email as well. So please have a happy Pride, however you choose to celebrate, virtually or through the Google Lens. Is it Google Lens, Derrick? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's Google 360.
Google 360.
Yes.
I love it. I think it's really, really great. Well, you know what? We all are on this journey together, and we all have power and control to continue to build more equity, more inclusion, more empathy. So thank you all for being with us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Take care.